never visit my grandma for Christmas again. I love visiting my grandma. She always makes the food that I like, and in large quantities, and spoils me with the hustle and bustle of college life. It's nice to go back to my childhood and allow myself to be spoiled for a few hours every few weeks. Even though she has 6 grandchildren, she made it clear that I'm her absolute favorite. She'd often have the whole family around for dinner, and after they left, she'd bring out the good stuff she made just for me. We usually have a big Christmas dinner together with the whole family. However, as the years go by and the youngest ones started growing up, fewer and fewer people show up. Last year, everyone has already made plans, forgetting about poor grandma. I don't blame them, but they often forget how these visits mean a lot to her, especially ever since grandpa died. That's why when I talked on the phone with her and she asked me if I had any plans, I lied to her and told her I didn't. She immediately jumped at the opportunity to politely invite me, going so far as to offer me to sleep over at her place. She said there's one room which hasn't been used in years and I could stay in there. I immediately said yes and agreed to stay over, realizing how happy that could make her. I canceled the plans I made with my friends, telling them something else came up. Although they were pumped about it a little, their drinking party couldn't stop because of me. That was the last Christmas that I could ever spend with my grandma. On Christmas Eve, I arrived at my grandma's place and she greeted me like she always does, with a tight hug and lots of kisses. I barely even stepped inside when she started offering me food. She had already made what could only be described as a buffet. We dug in, and once we were done, she showed me where I could sleep for the night. It was a cozy little bedroom, which apparently used to be my mom's room when she was little. Grandma told me not to leave my room during Christmas night in order to avoid disrupting Santa in his work. She said that if I really needed to use the bathroom, I could, but to be extremely quiet and not to go downstairs. On the nightstand, she left a list of the things that I should do before I go to bed to ensure I get a good present. I decided to play along and abide by the rules. I told her I'd read it before bed and do everything necessary, and she seemed content with that. She wished me good night and left the room. I was pretty tired from the trip there and the enormous dinner I have eaten, so I lay down on the bed and involuntarily fell asleep within minutes. I woke up a few hours later. I glanced at my watch and realized it was 3 a.m. I got up to grab a glass of water downstairs from the kitchen and luckily walked through the dark, trying to avoid any loud noise or turning on the lights, not to wake Grandma up. I went downstairs and turned on the kitchen light, gulping down a glass of water. I glanced towards the living room at the Christmas tree, and something caught my attention under the glow of the decoration lights. There was a small plate with a tiny paper that said, "For Santa." I reckoned it was cookies and milk, but when I got closer, I realized that the plate was empty. Red liquid was in it, and right next to the plate was a small bucket. Obviously, I found this weird, but figured that Grandma may have just forgotten to put it away or something. I turned off the kitchen lights and returned to my room. Just then, remembering the list my grandma gave me, I grabbed it off my nightstand and started reading. Dear James, thank you for visiting me for Christmas. You made your grandma really happy. Now, Christmas is a little different in this house than what you're probably used to. So it's very important that you follow these rules on the list. Number 1, make sure to close your windows and ensure they are closed properly. These old windows don't work properly sometimes. So, if you feel like cold air is coming in, let me know. Number 2, don't put any wood in the fireplace after 9 p.m. Santa will be really angry if it's scalding in the chimney or if there's still smoke. Number 3, you didn't forget about milk and cookies, did you? I stopped reading and chuckled at the list. Grandma clearly wanted me to follow the basic rules for Santa like when I was a kid. But again, I decided to oblige. I continued reading the list. In this house, we don't use milk and cookies. We use raw meat and blood. I already left a pocket by the Christmas tree, and there's a raw piece of chicken I put on the plate. Santa sure loves his diet. Number 4, if you are woken up by the sound of scratching or knocking on your window, ignore it. Your room is on the 2nd floor. There is no way to reach up to it. In fact, it's best not to look there. But if you see someone beckoning you, pretend they're not there. They may try to open the window from the outside. This is why it's so important to keep the windows closed. Number 5, you may hear growling coming from the kitchen. It's okay, because Santa never comes upstairs, and since I already left the chicken for him, that should satisfy him. By this point, I was sure Grandma was just messing with me. That was until I heard the sound of 3 gentle knocks on the window behind me. I froze in place, staring at the list, but particularly staring through it. 3 more gentle knocks ensued, but I did my best not to give away that I heard them. Once again, there were 3 more knocks, and then the sound of scratching started, first gently, and then louder, as if a rat was trying to bat through the wall. It lasted for around a minute, until it completely stopped. Only when it did I gather enough courage to slightly shift my position. That was a mistake though, because when I looked down the floor, at the light which were cast in from the window, that was a mistake though, because when I looked down to the floor, at the light which was cast in from the window, I saw the unmistakable shadow in the form of a humanoid silhouette stretched across. I couldn't tell for sure, but it looked like whoever was there held both his hands on the window and stared directly towards me. I decided that the best thing to do is to continue reading the list to try and distract myself. Number 6. If someone walks into your room while you're sleeping and you happen to wake up, pretend that you're still asleep. In the worst case scenario, the person will sit on the edge of your bed and observe you. So do your best not to let them know you're awake. If you feel their breath on your neck and it gets progressively closer, it means they realized you're awake. Number 7. You may hear me calling you from downstairs. Don't listen to it. I will under no circumstances go downstairs during the night. Number 8. Last and most important rule. If you get up to go to the bathroom, never, ever, ever turn on any lights in the house. He has trouble noticing you in the dark. But if you turn on the lights, he will be able to follow you wherever you go, and then not even locking your door will help. Number 9. Follow these simple rules and in the morning, we can open your Christmas presents. Love, Grandma. The scratching and knocking had already stopped by the time I was done reading, and the shadow from the window was gone. I got into bed and covered myself over my head, shivering, and not from the cold. Sometimes during the night, I heard my door opened, but did my best to ignore the footsteps and low growling noise. I either passed out or fell asleep sometimes later, but all I know is I woke up to the sound coming downstairs from the kitchen. I shot up, looking around the room and at the window, rubbing my temples and thinking about the nightmare I had. I left my room and immediately heard my grandma's voice calling me down from downstairs to come open the presents. I told her I'm coming. When I suddenly felt a grip on my wrist, I turned around and saw my grandma there, staring at me, wide-eyed. She leaned in and whispered in my ear with a trembling voice, "You turned on the lights, didn't you?"
Brookview Community Center was always the highlight of my summer. Ever since we lost Mom to cancer, Dad and I sort of made it into our escape from the weight reality most times brought onto us, and usually it was the fact that Mom was really gone forever. On most nights, we would hit the play button on our rented karaoke machine and just sing our hearts out. And many times we would usually end up crying because Mom's favorite song somehow always found its way into the playlist. As weird as it may seem, the only reason we went to Brookview Community Center every summer was for the police convention. Dad was a sheriff at the state police department, so it was kind of mandatory that he showed up for the convention. It was pretty boring stuff at first, just blue and white as far as the eye can see, although the police sirens did make for a good light show at night. The security symposiums and defense talks went on for hours, and many times I felt my mind get so tired of the symposiums that it would literally take a break from my body. Dad would ask how the symposium went, and I would look him straight in the eye and say, "I wasn't there, Dad." And he would reply laughing, "I know. Lord knows where your mind wanders off to." The only thing I looked forward to was spending time with Dad. At least that was the case until they started a forensic exhibits at the convention. They would arrange elaborate crime scenes with blood splatter, scattered furniture, broken glass, and the works. It was fascinating to me, and I would spend hours just looking over the false crime scene trying to figure out what happened, and I usually did. Dad named me Kate Holmes, jokingly, saying that my detective skills matched Sherlock's own. The weight of reality hits differently every time it comes. Mom's death taught me that, and today it hit much harder than ever before. I walked into my classroom, and it was like the forensic exhibit, but this time with a punch to the gut. It was like the class had been hit by a hurricane. The tables were scattered, chairs everywhere, but the clincher was the fact that right in front of where I normally sit was underwear stained with blood. On getting closer, I realized it was ladies' underwear. I knew summer break just ended, so only the nerds ever resumed school on the first day, and while the guys on the football teams loved practical jokes, this was quite a sick joke to make. Equal parts scared and curious, I decided to keep the underwear in a Ziploc bag and try to find out what really happened. Was this a joke? Or was someone really hurt? The bell rang. School was in session. Everyone was taken aback by the state of the class, but since there were no suspects, the matter died down quickly. Kate! Kate! Her voice seemed to shock me back into reality. What are you thinking about? You seemed lost for a moment there, she added. I turned to face her and said, Jenna, promise me you won't freak out if I showed you something weird. Jenna laughed and said, You're the squeamish one, remember? I laughed, feeling a little lighter. Jenna always had that effect on me, even after I lost my mom. She stood by me through it all. She was more than my best friend. She was more like family to me. During the lunch break, Jenna and I snuck into the janitor's closet, and I showed her the Ziploc bag. Her face went white. She muttered, So that happened in our class? I replied, What happened? Jenna went on to tell me how she resumed much earlier than most of us. Yes, she was one of the nerds I was referring to. And while studying in the library, she heard a scream and rushed to see one of the exchange students crying on the class floor. Her clothes had been torn and she had bruises all over. I ran for help, but by the time I came back, she was gone, said Jenna, quite shaken up at this point. Perplexed, I bolted out of the closet, 1,000 thoughts running through my head. How could this happen? Who could have done this? Why? There was only one person I could trust. It was Mr. Harry, the English teacher. He helped me and Jenna out of one too many troubles we got into. I told him all that had happened and even handed over the Ziploc bag to him. He looked perplexed, but promised to report this to the authorities. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, until the week after school resumed fully and I arrived to meet the classroom scattered like it was that day. But this time, I was not surprised. My dad didn't name me Kate Holmes for nothing. I had gotten tired of waiting for Mr. Harry to get back to me on what the authorities said, so I borrowed a few hidden cameras from my dad's office and planted them in the classroom, and looped the feed onto a secure server to which only I had the access to. I was going to get to the bottom of this, and nothing was going to stop me. On getting home, I logged into the server to watch the video and immediately picked my phone up to call Jenna. I had to talk to her, but she wasn't picking up. Dad! Dad! Come see this! Dad watched the video and anger flashed in his eyes. It was like a storm brewing. He called the patrol cops and told them to split into two teams. One to go to Jenna's house to check up on her, and the other to go to Mr. Harry's house to arrest him for sexual assault. The video clearly showed Mr. Harry trying to rape Jenna. She escaped by kicking him in the groin. I think it's all thanks to the self-defense classes she took during the summer. A further investigation revealed that Mr. Harry had threatened other girls in the class, forcing them to sleep with him and threatening them with bad grades if they didn't. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on multiple counts of sexual assaults, and Dad made sure he didn't have it easy in the prison that he was sent to. Brookview Community Center. The siren light cut through the night sky once again. Dad, Jenna, Eliza, the exchange student, and I just finished from a symposium where we talked about vigilance and protecting the women around us and how the police should crack down on sexual assault. My mom's favorite song playing in the background. We got him, didn't we? I whispered. Eliza and Jenna replied, smiling. Yeah, we did. Lights out. We were all safe again. So that was the story. Thank you for listening. If you have any similar stories, you can send it to the link down below. Goodbye!